Many landlords have problems evicting recalcitrant tenants who continue staying on the property but refuses to pay rent, or who do not maintain the property or damage the fixtures and fittings, leaving the property in a war zone condition. Whenever there's a dispute between a landlady and a tenant, the legal cost is too expensive to initiate legal proceedings in a court of law. There surely must be a simpler way to resolve disputes similar to the Housing Tribunal, Consumer Tribunal and Strata Management Tribunal. The government should not enact laws to regulate and control all sorts of tenancy transactions. Those niche market property tenancies do not need government intervention. They got lawyers to draw the mutually agreeable terms and conditions of tenancy. In this episode, I would like to highlight on would the proposed Residential Tenancy Act put an end to tenancy wars? Now, the National House Buyers Association (HBA) refers to the past media reports where the immediate past Housing and Local Government Minister, Yang Berhormat Dato' Haijah Zuraida Kamaruddin, had proposed to introduce a Residential Tenancy Act (RTA), which is to table in Parliament next year. Now, if the RTA is to be made law, top of its objective must be to protect the legitimate interests of landlords against errant tenants and protect tenants against irresponsible landlords. From HBA's observation, many landlords have problems evicting recalcitrant tenant who continues to stay on the property but refuse to pay rent, or who do not maintain the property or damage the fixtures and fittings, leaving the property in a war zone condition.
Like, because I asked you to leave because you did not pay your rent. I asked you to leave my house. I wasn't evicting you. I didn't want to even put an eviction on your record. I just asked you to leave my house and you do this shit?
At the end of the spectrum, there are landlords who raise rent arbitrarily, refuse to rectify repairs in their property which may be in dilapidated condition, withholding tenants' security deposit without reasons, or find excuses to deduct non-existent damage to lessen refund to the tenants.
Keoka Cavins is moving out of her apartment after months of water and mold problems.
Leakage in the fixture.
On her cell phone, photos of water coming down from a light fixture.
Currently, both landlords and tenants need to initiate legal actions through the court of law to recover payments or enforce their rights under the tenancy agreement, which could be costly. The rental areas or deposit owing may be less than the legal fees incurred under disputes for such claims. In addition, should short home stay programs such as Airbnb come under RTA, where occupants of these properties flaunt management rules, incur the wrath of neighbors and residents within a development? What about the rights of resident association in gated and guarded communities and management bodies for stratified property, which are sometimes inadvertently involved in tenancy disputes? HBA is concerned with the intended scope of the RTA, as it is also aimed, as was reported, to cover matters such as rent control for housing areas and perceived racist practice on potential tenants. HBA is of the view that the proposed RTA, Rental Tenancy Act, should not include both of these areas for the following reasons. Rental is always based on free market. Rental in a private commercial arrangement between a willing tenant and a willing landlord, and the government should not interfere in such arrangement. The government would be sending a very wrong message to the investing public at large by trying to interfere in such private rental arrangement. If the government is going to interfere with rental for residential housing, there will be a call for government to also interfere in rental for commercial properties. The government will then be forced to cap rental for even shopping malls, food courts, restaurants, office buildings, etc., etc. And this would definitely drive away our local and foreign investors. It was reported that one of the reasons that the government wants to cap rental is to exert some control for low-cost housing projects. The minister was reported to have said some irresponsible ones have been charging higher rates for foreigners. HBA wishes to remind the minister that low-cost housing is meant for owners, occupation, and not allowed to be rented out. To say that the government is allowing low-cost properties to be rented out, what more, to foreigners, is a betrayal of the purpose of building such low-cost housing properties in the first place, which is to provide a roof for the poor and should not be used for property speculation. HBA has been calling for stricter enforcement of existing rules to ensure that low and also medium cost properties are not rented out to third parties and are located to the correct target group. Owners have the right to choose their tenant. Every house owner must have the right to choose whom they want to rent to. Different owners have different criteria based on their past experiences and individual preference. And while HBA does not support using race as a criterion, the fact remains that the landlord should not be compelled to rent to a tenant he or she does not wish to. It is a prerogative of landlords to choose their tenant. Choosing or profiling is a methodical risk management practice based on quantified qualitative attributes of tenants. One cannot possibly be expected to rent to a potential tenant who is problematic from the onset. The proposed RTA cannot take away the indefeasible rights of property owners, which includes the rights to dispose and lease rent a property to anyone of their own choosing. Instead, HBA called for the current Minister of Housing and Local Government to ensure that the rights of both tenant and landlords are protected in the following key areas under the proposed RTA. For the tenant and landlords, you'll be on the screen for your easy reading. Now, perhaps the RTA should incorporate the common terms already in use in most of the tenancy agreement in Malaysia, with the addition for better safeguarding of both the landlords and tenant. The RTA should strive to have a standard term and condition for a tenancy agreement where the rights, duties, and remedies are balanced between the landlord and tenant, as well as the quantum of security deposit, tenure of tenancies, and the option thereof. Landlord and Tenant Dispute Tribunal. Now, if the law is going to be passed, it is necessary to protect the interests and regulate the simple tenancy practice of both landlords and tenants alike. The RTA should provide a much-needed solution to the problems in the tenancy segment. We suggest initiating a quasi-court in the form of tenancy dispute for certain trivial disputes as an alternative dispute resolution to the current court of law, which are not only expensive but are also time-consuming. The tribunal should be tailored for a speedy, cheap, simple dispute resolution to seek legal redress between the feuding parties. Last but not least, if there is a seriousness in proceeding with the RTA, we suggest that close monitoring of landlord and tenant be carried out, perhaps by a system to identify errant landlord and wayward tenant. Such information or rating of landlord and tenant via a blacklisting rating system or database should be made available to the market to assist other landlords and potential tenants in their decision making before executing a tenancy agreement. The question is whether the ministry is capable of undertaking the additional task. What do you think? Question 1, Dato Chang. Is it true that the market will crash if rent rates are kept by the government? Question 2. Understand that the minister wished to balance the landlord's aspiration with the tenant's need, especially the B40 category. The government also suggested a standard tenancy agreement between the landlord and tenant. Would you like to offer your suggestion? Of course, the market will crash if the government set a maximum rental rates across the board. You cannot legislate economic distribution. It has to be determined by market forces. Rental is a private commercial arrangement between willing tenant and willing landlord. It will surely deter investment from both local and foreign interests. However, if you are talking about regulating a control rate for low-cost houses, perhaps that can be applied. But then again, I wish to reiterate that low-cost houses are intended for self-occupation and not supposed to be open for rent to third parties. Those tenants who have rented from a local council wishing to make money to sublet to others, then their tenancy should be terminated or given to those more deserving families. The second question, we would like to suggest to cap the threshold rent to fall under the ambit of the RTA or the proposed RTA to be kept at 1,000 ringgit and below. This way, more tenants could be protected while not imposing and stifle upon the high niche of the rental market. HBA had no objections to a template for a standard tenancy agreement between the parties with the do and don'ts, and such terms and conditions must be balanced. Third question, Dato Chang, the government wanted to even curb the rent deposit to 2 months only and park with a financial institution because they are afraid that the landlord will run away. Does it make sense? Locking in with 2 months deposit is not a problem. Problem arises when the unit is fully furnished with fixtures and fittings and electrical appliances worth more than 2 months equivalent. Then how? It is incomprehensible that landlady will run away with the deposit. The premises belong to the landlady, and I'm sure the building won't run away unless the building is burnt to the ground. The deposit is the landlady's right to keep and preserve. she may decide to invest it or may not want to park with a bank. It's her prerogative. My fourth question, Dr. Chang, there was some insinuation that the government wanted to enact the RTA for the reason to curb racist practices. We dissent that the primary aim of the proposed RTA, if it's to be legislated, is to combat racism. Unfortunately, racism and racist practices are prevalent not only in the tenancy market but in other areas of life and society. Look around and you arrive at your own conclusion. If I am to rent my property, I don't care about your skin color. If you can pay, I'll rent to you. See, a Chinese person comes to me and offer 2,000 ringgit to rent my apartment, but the next person who can offer me 2,300 ringgit and happens to be Malay, it's obvious. I will accept the higher rent. Different owners will have different criteria based on their experience and individual preferences. While HBA does not support using race as a criterion, a property owner should not be compelled to rent to a tenant not of his choice. Instead of using the RTA to combat racism, educate potential landlord and tenant on the shared role and responsibility may be the way forward. The problem may not lie with the discrimination of a particular ethnicity, more of a perception that certain ethnicities make less palatable tenant and hence charging of higher rent. This kind of perception would also be perpetuated due to the lack of understanding or education in different cultures. Thank you for the excellent questions. My next talk will be titled Clearing Call for a New Law to Tackle Neighbors from Hell, where we propose a law governing neighborly behavior that would be merged with the proposed RTA to make it more holistic. We should not adopt the laws from other countries blindly without taking into account our own social, cultural, economic circumstances. The objective of the proposed law should turn our neighborhoodness into a better place to live for our rakyat. See you in the next episode. Cheers!